Hello, George. Good morning.
Tomas, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm okay.
Good. Ned is coming in also.
Good.
Good. And I
Morning.
guess,
Morning.
hello, Ned.
Hi, Tom. Fred, George.
Is Fred here in a spaceship? Let me.
Yeah, the Odyssey.
There he is.
Yeah. Classy suspenders and all.
Yeah.
And
Otherwise-
we're waiting for John. I guess George said he couldn't make it.
Right, yeah. Tom, before we finish or start, you recommended an article from La Civiltà Católica, is that right?
Right.
And you said it was right on, although there was some, I couldn't get it even passing it through the website that you gave us.
Through the outline.
Yeah, and you said that hits it right on bullseye, sort of. What was that?
I don't know. I've got so many balls in the air right now. I can't even quite remember.
Okay.
But let me see if I can find it here.
Well, it looked really interesting. I thought seriously of subscribing to La Civiltà. It's $50 a year or something like that.
Something like that.
It's put out by the Italian Jesuits,
Right.
Oh,
and
didn't
the vast majority of articles are in Italian.
Well, but they have an English edition. Okay.
Okay.
It's,
they
Okay.
do.
I didn't know that.
yeah.
And they gave you a little taste, paragraph, and then
Right.
saying that understanding the current understanding of Catholicism was evanescing, and the verities of the gospel and the epistles and tradition were becoming amorphous, and that the really only thing that we could count on, at least tentatively, was the suffering, and I always add, I don't know whether it said it, and the resurrection of Jesus, the weakness of Christ.
Yeah.
And it sort of centered itself there, and then it disappeared, and I couldn't look at anything else.
Yeah, that's basically, and I realized the outline link didn't give any more either.
Yeah, it
Oh.
didn't.
It really didn't leap over the paywall. So let's see what.
You were nodding, Fred. What are you thinking about that?
Well, you can't. So in a way, it seems to me, I didn't have a chance to read it because I've been working on my syllabuses.
Mhm.
But it sounds to me that they're talking about what unfortunately may be the vast majority of people who are Catholic, who are slowly but surely becoming nuns, N-O-N-E-S.
Yeah.
And for them, those are the only things that would really make sense. But they'd have to be extraordinary people for it to make sense. And what I do know is you can't know about the resurrection without the gift of faith. And so they're leaving that out. And I take it because they're really appealing to what most people might be able to cling to, insofar as they're scandalized by the church, by the old church,
Mhm.
that in a sense is falling apart, has fallen apart. So, and I think I got to watch something I think you sent to me about by Bishop, the bishop in San Diego, what's his name?
McElroy.
Barron, Bishop Barron,
Oh, Barron, he's in Santa Barbara,
Santa Barbara,
but
okay.
his heart is still back in Chicago.
Is it?
Well, I
Yes,
don't know. His heart is certainly beyond
Yeah.
beyond LA and Santa Barbara.
that's true. It's also in Paris,
Maybe
Where-
his heart's still back in Paris.
where it did its visitation.
I
It's gotta be
love
hard,
Paris and
but I
the
mean, it definitely is the case that
Go ahead.
that the church, he's trying to the notion of the church that he's trying to spread has little to do with, it seems to me, what that article is saying.
Yeah,
He's making the bet that if people could re-understand the church in the mode in which he talks about it as good news rather than bad news.
and the title of the article is "The Weakness of Christ: An Argument for His Truth."
Yeah.
And I'm not really too sure what else I can do.
Oh, no, don't worry. I'll
Um,
figure it out. I just thought you might.
But that view that as Ned summarized it, really would do away with the Gospel of John,
Yeah.
which the crucifixion and resurrection are inseparably united.
mhm.
So I would have a tremendous problem with that idea.
How do we do away with what it's rather late to be reselecting the canon, you know? I mean, how do we do away with the gospel?
Well, I don't think there's any question of doing that in here. Where I think the question is that the truth of Christ is his identification with us precisely in the weakness of our human nature, and that most people
Okay.
tend to see the proof for Christ being in the power of his miracles. You know, that he's acting with God's power to transcend nature. And what he's saying, which I totally buy, is that we are saved because Christ reached down into the depths and shared in our weakness.
So that-
Philippians chapter 2.
Precisely,
Yeah.
Yeah.
precisely.
yeah, he
Well,
became
He,
sin.
he sees that as a stronger argument, shall we say, for the truth of Christ, that he is not embodying God kind of looking down on us, saving us from afar, as he is embodying God who becomes so much one with us that he allows himself to be weak as we are. That's the point he's making, I think.
That's
Okay, well, I'd love to read this article, and I'm just so far behind on everything, but it's not a new thought. I
No.
mean, you know, Jesus became like us in all things but sin.
actually
And then
he became
he
sin.
became sin, says St.
Mhm.
Paul.
Yeah.
But
No, it's not a new thought. He never says it is.
huh?
But it is counter to what is a general apologetic stand that many people, and I think including Barron, kind of fall prey to.
Which is,
Well,
what is-
what's Barron falling prey to?
The
Classic-
apologetics that Jesus is the emphasis so much on his divinity that he is above us, trying to pull us
Oh.
up. And
Well,
I
you
think,
know,
and I think the myself, a better theology is he got right down to the very depths to lift us up, not to pull us up like on a string.
Uh-huh. You know, for me, guys, when I found out there was such a thing as the low Christology and kind of what it was, first time I stumbled across it was reading On Being a Christian by Hans Kuhn, and then later meeting Herbert, and I just didn't have to believe. I realized all this, you know, highfalutin stuff. I mean, it made all the difference in the world to me at the time. Realizing there was a low Christology, but would this article, Tom, eliminate the resurrected Jesus?
Oh, no, no. In
Okay.
fact, the resurrection is God's affirmation that this suffering, humiliated, self-outpouring Christ, a second person of the Trinity, God's affirmation that we are saved, that this is true.
Yeah.
And the promise, and the promise that in him, united with him as members of his body, we are living that same crucified state in the hope of the promise of the resurrection as God raised Jesus from the dead. And you can, go ahead.
I'm debating whether I want to teach in our parish, you know, religious ed program, because I don't know if I'd be any good at it or not. And I mean, my instinct, and this is just, it could be totally wrong. To the extent I think in terms of apologetics with people who say, how can you believe this bullshit, you know, or something like that? My response is to start with, well, I happen to believe that the resurrection of Jesus is a historical fact. I've you know, and I've thought that ever since I read N.T. Wright's book on it. It's a historical fact. It would stand up in a court of law, I think. And it's the most, there's a Baptist minister I represented in a special ed case said, it's certainly the most probable explanation of what happened, you know, at the time, just humanly. I mean, gee, they had a mystical experience, or Jesus actually rose from the dead. And isn't the weight of probability from an evidentiary point of view that Jesus rose from the dead? It seemeth to me. And if we can establish that, all things should follow. And if we can't establish it, we ain't getting nowhere. I would think. I don't know.
I'm not disagreeing.
I would put it this way. Basically, throughout our youth, we were brought up on what was called high Christology.
We certainly were.
Remember all the sermons we listened to that used the phrase Almighty God. And also they tend, in the Catholic tradition, they tended to avoid the term Jesus, and they always talked about Christ, the anointed one, but they didn't merely mean the anointed one. They more or less spoke of Christ as if it were his last name, but they avoided his first name. And it seems to me, so there's beginning from a certain interpretation, which is not really adequate, of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and without him was made nothing that was made. So that's a high Christology. And what the so-called low Christology was reacting against is that you're not really paying attention to Christos kata sarka, Christ according to the flesh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so you had the Christology from below. But it seemed to me that a fair number of scripture scholars against whom N.T. Wright, with whom N.T. Wright disagrees vehemently, really got into what you might call Christology from below downwards. And it seems to me that that you have to have a balance there with regard to the Christologies.
Mhm.
So that way that Martini talked about the different scriptures, the different books of the New Testament, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John is the way he would order it. That in a way, the lowest Christology is Mark's, and still it ends up with the centurion saying, "This is God at the cross." So it's not that low.
Mhm.
It touches all the bases.
Yeah, well, Mark also begins with exactly the same phrase.
That's true. That's right. And so that Paul talked about Jesus from the point of view of post-resurrection. And that's the earliest scripture. And that's where that hymn from in Philippians 2:6-11 comes from. And so that's early belief. He's writing in the 30s. And I think then you have the people who do it from the beginning of Christ's life, but in Mark's case, it's from the beginning of the public life with no infancy narratives. And then in Matthew and Mark and Luke, you have the infancy narratives before the public life. So they're in a way structuring the thing from birth to death, or from the beginning of his public life to his death and resurrection. But John is really, in a way, he's lifting the whole thing up, but not in such a way. Okay, again and again, Jesus seems much more divine throughout the Gospel of John.
Yes.
He knows people's hearts, what's in people's hearts, so he departs from the group of people who are out to get him and so forth. But it seems to me a higher integration of what's already taught in. It seems to me like an apex between Paul on the one hand and the three other Gospels on the other hand. So I don't think we have to give up that. And I do think that this is the way I read N.T. Wright on the resurrection, is that it is a matter, he is saying the probabilities all point in the direction of the resurrection, as opposed to people who are really doing Christology from below downwards. But still, in order to believe it, you have to have the gift of faith. In other words, the reason
Go ahead.
I don't, so in other words, it's not that you have a proof and then, okay, this is probably true according to historical critical method. And so now I'm going to believe. I think really this is just a fact of supporting what is already believed. And that's the intent of N.T. Wright. But maybe I'm wrong on that.
I don't think so.
Well, I love your phrase, how did you put it? They start with a low Christology and work their way down, or that's like the Jesus seminar, right? That's so well put. I've also read a little bit of Luke Timothy Johnson, who is no fan of the Jesus seminar, you know,
Yep.
to understate it a bit.
You have
But
to be automized to be a fan of that.
yeah, but Fred, I'm trying to think, because there was a time after I was revivified by Herbert, where I might have been agnostic on the question of, did Jesus physically rise from the dead? You know, maybe it was some sort of spiritual experience or something. I think I was at least open to that. But Wright convinced me intellectually. So I don't know. I didn't start out with the gift of faith in the resurrection, I don't think. I mean, it's getting to be a while ago now, but thank God. But I thought he made such a great case that it was like, okay, case closed, you know. So I don't know if it was faith or intellect.
Well, the way I read it is that your willingness to pay so much attention to Herbert really already was a matter of your having faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why he appealed so much to you.
Absolutely.
And so
Well,
when you have faith, it doesn't mean you don't have further questions.
yeah.
I would say that N.T. Wright is helping people who have the further questions about that, but not really supplying a proof for now you can believe, but you already believe in the resurrection because you in a certain sense, it's what made you fall in love with Herbert. You wouldn't have that reaction towards him if you didn't have something going on inside you that drew you, to which he could appeal and did appeal. So that's my interpretation.
Yeah, that's certainly true. You know,
Thank
some of your Boston Jesuits must have known him. I guess I would imagine.
Oh, sure, they would have, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm consistently finding little things that I didn't realize but knew that are always manifestations of Jesus, so much identifying with us that he goes through the requirements that the Jews imposed upon themselves, and obviously he doesn't. But right at the beginning, the baptism, you know, the sinless one, high Christology, is baptized or asks for baptism. And John says, what? You ought to be baptizing me. And he said, no. Let's fulfill all righteousness. And then God says, this is my son.
Yes.
This is my son. So
Somehow I didn't hear that when I was baptized.
but
Yeah.
you know,
So the Christology from below says you already believe in the resurrection, and the authors did too, and they're reading that back into the time of the baptism. But I don't think that's true. I think the way you're thinking about it in relation to reading that passage about the baptism is really the right way. it's a low Christology, but it's not that other kind of otherworldly Christology that Tom was. And that's proof. I mean, you're actually giving a proof text for this, that this is the Jesus that lived, who was fulfilling this rite of repentance, even though he didn't need to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's all over the place. Anyway,
Well, and because of that, and the mystical body and etc., you know, Fred, you could well have heard God saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased," because you were baptized into Jesus when you were baptized, right?
I've been baptized twice.
Mm.
Once-
Well, all the more so.
what was that story?
once
Does that make you twins?
I was baptized into the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And when I had lived life as a pagan till the 7th grade, when I became a believer, I was conditionally baptized again. But I've always understood it as for real, no matter what. I mean, it could have been for real from the beginning, but
Mhm.
And here comes John.
oh, good.
So when you were 7 and baptized conditionally, you
Yeah.
didn't hear God's voice telling you,
7th grade,
7th grade, I mean,
yeah.
God
So-
didn't speak from on high.
But the fact that I was attracted the way I was,
Hello, John.
Hi, Tom.
I had the experience of being shifted from public schools to St. John's Military Academy up on
Mhm.
Adams Street. And the reason for the shift was I was living with another family for 2 years. And my mother realized that she wanted me to come back with her. And the reason why she put me in St. John's Military Academy is that they already played tackle football.
Oh,
You like football,
But what happened was that the sister who taught me there, a Sister of Mercy from Burlingame, really in effect she pretty much loved me into the church,
huh?
even though I was a pain in the ass in the classroom. As I say about my grammar school life, I was outstanding in the hall. So that was really how it happened. And I guess God wanted to make sure I knew
Mhm.
the point of the thing. But I'm very grateful for the gift of being loved into the church. And that actually included the fellow person in the military academy with me, who was a Mexican person named Robert Mosier, who was part of the story of loving me into the church.
Wow.
That was confirmed by another person named Xavier Suazo, with whom I played sports outside of the academy. We would be together with bunches of kids who were in certain leagues that we played in. And they were all, you know the way teenagers are, they talk crap all the time about sex and girls and stuff like that. And I noted that Javier, he never ever joined in on that. And that impressed me a great deal, because usually people want to be so much with the group that they feel compelled to join in, even if they don't sincerely.
do you
join.
get any special sense of his family life?
Oh, yes. very much so. His he got his name, which was Swazo, from the immigration authorities when their parents came, when his parents came from Ecuador. And they didn't understand what the name was, so the guy gave him the name Swazo. But his father was they had the baby, him when he was very, very old. And the mother was a seamstress who made their living sewing like a crazy person from morning till night. And she was a very, very holy person. And I'm sure that really rubbed off on Xavier Javier. So that's what I know about his life. Mosier was away from his family. His two older sisters were going to one of the Catholic women's colleges in LA, and he went to the military academy. He actually came with me to take the test to get in the junior seminary, but he didn't get a high enough grade. And I'm sure it had something to do with his problems understanding English in some ways. Nevertheless, he was a model of virtue for me, and I looked up to him overwhelmingly. And so that's just a funny thing that happened to me in relation to two people who were native Spanish speakers, who in a way joined with that sister in loving me into the faith.
Did you stay in touch with him after?
I did with Javier, because I had time in the summers, but Mosier went back to Mexico in the summers.
Mm.
I gradually lost contact with him. So that's how that happened, but I feel close to him no matter what. He may be passed away from now, but who knows?
I vaguely remember, Fred, you had a sister. Am I right?
Yeah, I really
What-
have two sisters.
Two?
Yeah, another one was, she had 3 children by 3 different husbands.
Ooh,
The first 2 died, but she had one with my father, then one with an ex-husband. That was Anne, the one you know about. And then later on, when she married again, she had another one 6 years later after Anne. So that's the 3rd. And they're all still alive. And I'm in touch with them. And they all, we have, well, this is beside the point, but each of us had the experience that when my mother was married to the second husband, she always spoke in such glowing terms about my father. It was more or less like he was a demigod, whom she looked up to so much. And then my 3rd sister was told about Anne's father after he passed away. All good things, nothing bad. But there had been bad times because they were very serious alcoholics who and really caused a lot of suffering in the family. But
Okay.
but he was the guy who taught me how to. He was the father who taught me how to live, and who passed on the love of sports, not to say fanaticism.
I know about that.
Yes, you do. You know, my wife every night, John, has been watching the Dodgers for like the last month. And
And was it last night, 16 innings?
the night before.
Night before last.
Yeah, and I go to bed like 9 o'clock. I don't care what the score is. And Betty stayed there till the last dog died watching.
I couldn't stay up that late. Nope,
Well,
not anymore.
Betty did 16 innings,
My mother and dad were an interesting mix because mother was the big sports fan. Dad was Mr. Practical, machine shop business and all that. But he loved my mom. So when they were able, he bought season tickets to the Dodgers out of love for my mother.
Well, how often did he go though?
He went fairly often, but obviously he enjoyed it if I would take her or one of my siblings, he made those sacrifices, yes.
I mean, I can't imagine going to a Dodgers, having seasons tickets and having to go to all those games.
You all know Father Frank Weber. I
Yeah,
guess he's Monsignor now.
Has been
So-
for a long time.
I was his
Oh,
assistant
I know the
after
story.
second theology, and I took him to a Dodger game. And honest to God, at the end of the first half inning, he turned to me and he said, I assume it's now 1/18 over. That was Weber.
How did he calculate a half an inning? I could see a third, 2/3.
Well, I think I offered to go get a beer or something. It was the visiting team got their 3 outs. And he knew that much.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Frank
But
Webb,
It might have been the scoreboard, George. I'm thinking out loud now. He might have looked up at the scoreboard and counted, 9 innings, 1/18.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of half of a 3 outs inning, not 6 outs. But that is very funny.
just wanted to mention that Frank would be the one who, when I first went to Rome, got all the guys sent to Rome, took them out to dinner.
Oh,
And he wrote his dissertation on docility. And I thought, wow, that'd be the day that I'd write on that.
I've only met him once, which was at that reunion we had.
oh, yeah.
But I just thought he was probably the most charming person I've ever been with, met for the first time. He had great stories.
Yes.
He was a historian, right?
Huh?
He wrote history, didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a biography.
History of the diocese.
Yeah, he wrote a biographies of Cardinals Manning and McIntyre.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, as Herbert put it, poor Monsignor Weber, Cardinal McIntyre was such a personal hero of his that it influenced the objectivity of his biography.
Interesting.
Well, I don't think he had a terribly great reputation for objectivity in any of his historical writings. Everything that
Well,
I've seen has been rather slanted towards the good of the institutional church.
Well, the Tidings, when he wrote his biography of Cardinal McIntyre, the Tidings actually gave space to Terry Halloran to review it. Remember that? And
Wow.
Terry's review was less than fulsome, I guess would be the word. I mean, he missed this, he missed this, he missed this, he missed this. You know, and they published it.
Mhm.
And I think Connolly wrote a critical letter, didn't he, Tom?
I don't know, he may have. I wouldn't doubt it.
But that might be the way he understood docility.
That's interesting.
Well, I guess it's a bit like Weigel and JP too. You know, burning candles at the altar.
I thought that was a great biography, but as Fred pointed out, it's also hagiographic a
Mhm.
lot.
Mhm.
But I mean, John Paul was, John Paul. I mean, what do you say about a guy who was run down in the streets of Krakow by a Nazi truck, and then became the archbishop and fought the commies for 20 years? Or
Mhm.
Guy, what a guy.
yeah. But Ned, I still think the theology of the body is a crock. But
I've heard that many times.
but I have only read 2 or 3 pages of it at a time, because that's all I can handle. It's just like, where do you get this bullshit? It was kind of my reaction. Fred, what?
Do you know, Fred, how that developed, or Tom, anybody? Because it seemed to me that it was bits and pieces that would come out at various times in sort of spontaneous talk, and somebody tried to weave it together and make it coherent.
Yeah,
That's one.
I defer on that one. I really don't. I've never been terrible. From what I've heard or read of the theology of the body, it sounds like it may have some good points, but it just never spoke to me. So I didn't follow very much. Some of the daughters of St. Paul seem to be very enamored with it.
Daughters of St. Paul.
Yeah. The media nuns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the story about the Irish woman who came out of church and said that the priest had preached on marriage, but he knew very little about it.
Yeah. Bishop Sheen, they say, had a very similar one of the two middle-aged women in the back of the church during the young priest's homily on marriage. And one says, I sure wish I knew as little about it as he does.
That's cool. But there was one of the Vicentians, I can't remember his name. It's a college. I cannot remember this man's name, but he made a comment that, I can't lay eggs, but I know more about them than chickens do, or something like that. Do you remember that guy?
Was that our so-called science?
No, it wasn't.
I don't remember.
He had brownish hair, and I don't even know what he taught. Oh well.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Who was the rector who was teaching us biology, I guess it was. Or
Father Powers.
Powers. And he blanked out all the windows up that were so high you couldn't see through them anyway. And then he said, now I'm going to show you this for just a few minutes. And then I'm going to cut it out because it's an occasion of, possibly an occasion of sin for you. And then he flashed up the a little outline of two human beings, one male and one female. And he said, now this is what we look like, you know, unclothed, and this is the beginning of procreation, and something like that. And then 2 minutes later, boom, it went off, and that was it. Everybody just kind of looked at each other, wondering what the good old Powers.
I don't remember that.
You don't? Do you, John?
No.
Yes. Not in as much detail, except just how uncomfortable and out of, what are we talking of, common sense, out of common knowledge?
Yeah.
Was Powers.
Well, the other story that I remember about, and I don't think it happened to us, I think it was the class behind us, where he was lecturing on male anatomy and had a huge, you know, chart diagram of a penis behind him, and it fell on its head.
No, oh no.
He must have been very, very, very.
That sounds like a made up story to me.
But if I remember rightly, the story goes way back to those days,
Yeah.
college days. But
Remember, someone, I think it might have been John, told us about Mike Malloy and his, whoever his friend is.
Partner, yeah.
Yeah, partner. Saying to a bishop that all but X number of priests popes were homosexuals.
With the exception of John the 23rd. He said.
Oh, but you'd have to put, I think you'd have to put.
No, with the exception of John Paul. That's right.
Finish.
It was I who told that story. And then when I told it to Herbert, he laughed and he said, no, I think John the 23rd was probably heterosexual. That was Herbert's only comment to the story.
mhm. Well, let's see. You all were in Rome during the Paul VI days,
Yes,
because I remember that when I was there, probably in 72, 73, there were a couple of expose type articles in the Italian tabloids about Paul VI homosexual escapades, shall we say. But I think, they were probably fabricated, but nonetheless, it seemed to be out in the tabloid air at any rate.
Mhm. Who knows?
Who knows?
Herbert loved Paul VI.
Oh, based on, what would you say, George?
He knew him. I don't know in what capacity. I guess with the Arctic Commission, Paul had appointed him to that. But I remember him telling a story about he had great compassion for Paul VI. And they were talking, and it was about how to handle people leaving the priesthood.
Oh,
Paul had for a while thought the thing to do was let him go, and then he decided, but everybody's going, maybe I should close the doors. And he said to Herbert something like, perhaps it would be better to close the doors of St. Peter's so that all these stallions or horses cannot gallop out. And Herbert said to him, "In holiness, if you do, they will smash themselves to death against the doors." Words to that effect. Yeah, I don't know what year that was. It was after the Vatican Council, obviously.
Mhm.
But
I do think Paul VI undertook an impossible task of trying to steer so many areas of the council into actual church reform and church policy, and had mixed success. I think hindsight would say, but nonetheless he did it, and probably suffered a lot for it.
clearly he suffered.
He always looked like a very sad man to me,
Yeah.
very dour and hurting somehow.
He always reminded me of Eichmann, the way he looked. I don't know.
The banality, of evil,
Huh?
the banality of evil,
Yeah.
Arendt.
Yeah.
But I admired him because at least the lore about him was that he really was tremendously influenced by the young Jacques Maritain.
Uh-huh.
And I admired that Maritain. Ernie Fortin, my colleague, who's an Assumptionist, said that young radicals become old conservatives. It's very common. And he named several instances. And that's what happened to Maritain. So the older Maritain was an ultra conservative, but the younger one was in trouble. Always a good sign, perhaps.
Well, yeah, supposedly that's Ratzinger, same pattern. I don't know. The little bit of Ratzinger I read, I like. I mean, what do you think, Fred? He's an impressive writer. And
Absolutely. I remember when I went to Rome, we, whoops, I'm sorry,
We got you.
Kuhn's book about the council. And so when we met the people who, from the Germanicum, in their big red cassocks, I would ask people, what do you think of Hans Kuhn? And they would always sort of look down their nose and say, we at the Germanicum look up to Father Ratzinger instead of Kuhn. So, but that, I think all the respect they gave him was certainly deserved. He's a brilliant person, a faithful person. He means to be good. And I think the fact that he resigned from the papacy because he knew what a mess it was, what a mess the dicasteries were and so forth, and knew he didn't not know how to deal with that.
Mhm.
I thought it was a really admirable thing.
Courageous.
And his scripture work is wonderful. And his knowledge of the whole tradition is wonderful. he already had a big influence in the early part of the council, and that was salutary. I think he kind of, well, I just don't really understand what happened after the council. Apparently, Bishop Barham calls them the silly years, where people
Oh,
would
does he?
do all kinds of stuff, stupid things. And it was while he was a seminarian, and he often said that when he was a seminarian, all they got was Rahner, and that was too liberal. But finally, he found Balthasar, and he connected with Balthasar with the so-called ressourcement theology of de Lubac and Chenu and others. And that's where he kind of stood. But he didn't mention Ratzinger, oddly enough. But I think Ratzinger would have fit into that.
Wasn't Ratzinger's moment of change in 1968 with the student rebellions in Germany?
Oh, I think there was that's certainly.
I have recollections of that he's
You're right.
wait a minute, this movement that I'm supporting and I'm part of is going in a direction that's not going to end well.
I think you're
Well,
right.
well, his classroom was stormed allegedly at Tübingen by student protesters. And
Yeah.
I guess a little of that would go a long way.
For sure, yeah.
I have often felt that the bad rap that Ratzinger has gotten, has been from conservatives who haven't really read him, but just claim to be his supporters and followers. But you read in between the lines, or you read actually some of the stuff that he wrote, that he wasn't the stuffy stick in the mud that they would like to make him out to be. And some of his stands, even social stands, and stands on war and peace,
Mhm.
were not exactly what his supporters would support if they actually read him.
Right.
Well, Weigel came up with a theory that somebody had written part of his last or next to last encyclical, and it didn't really reflect his Benedict's mind. It's a remarkable thing to accuse the Pope of, letting other people, write his stuff.
But I teach courses on political theology, because when I was doing my dissertation, half of it on Hans-Georg Gadamer, I got interested in those student movements that Tom just mentioned. And there was maybe you've heard of him, Jürgen Habermas,
Mhm.
was an up and coming star. And he really did not like that aspect of the student. We called it Linksfaschismus, fascism on the left. And so they wouldn't really be in a conversation. They'd always be right. Not right in the sense of American right and so forth. He was a brilliant writer. He still is. He's over 90 years old. And he was very, very liberal. And finally, in the later years, it dawned on him that liberal democracy doesn't have the basis for its support of itself. And he realized that although he called himself religiously tone deaf, he realized that religion, in some sense, would have to be a basis for maintaining liberal democracy. And so he entered into a conversation with Ratzinger, which Ratzinger engaged him in. And they addressed each other with the highest respect. In other words, Habermas wasn't often in conversations with people who could operate on his level of discourse, but Ratzinger surely did. So that was very interesting to me, and another reason why I admire Ratzinger.
Mhm.
But I do think he was pretty hapless as a pope,
Yeah,
and too interested in trying to appease those Lefebvrists, or whatever they were called, those conservatives who were revolting from the council. I think he was too conciliatory. But on the other hand, he was trying to bring them back to a reasonable estimation of the council, rather than just a revolt against it.
Mhm.
Also, he's the one who acknowledged the validity of Anglican priests who wanted to become Catholic, and so he wasn't going along with the idea that you had to be in the line of succession of bishops putting the hand on the head of the ordinands, but he talked about their orders as valid to a great extent.
but wait.
Do you have any kind of reference for that? Because I find that very interesting. I'm in dialogue with a local Anglican retired priest here, and I know that somewhere or other that's going to the question of orders and Leo the 13th and what value we should make of that is going to come up in our conversations.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I can't tell you anything right offhand.
Okay.
Well, John Paul reiterated Leo with the Arctic Commission to Herbert's intense displeasure.
I think the idea, there was an American guy who he was an Anglican who became an American and wrote about the historical succession of the bishops, and that was his argument. But I just don't go for litmus tests when it comes to holy orders, because some of the most wonderful priests I've ever met have been, in fact, Anglicans. And so I just don't buy it, but they have to, the one I'm thinking of in Boston, whose mass I went to in the Brookline parish, he had to go through some kind of instruction, but I don't think he had to get reordained. And that's really what I'm thinking about.
Well, if we don't require them to be reordained, then how do we look askance at what goes on every Sunday in all the Episcopalian churches?
Stop looking askance.
I mean, they're either valid or they're not, right? The Anglican orders. And if they're valid for guys coming in to, take Father Lincoln's place out in San Bernardino, which is what's happened out there, Tom, then why wouldn't they be valid, you know, at the church across the street from my parish here?
I think what happened to the church is that the first human science that really developed was law. And you guys are, you especially, are very influenced by law. And you like these terms called validity and invalidity and so forth. But I don't think that's at the heart of the mystery of the church.
I don't either.
Yeah, I
But I
know
always
you.
blame this on Roman jurisprudence. You know, I mean, the Roman Empire was characterized by, among other things, the rule of law, right?
Indian. Right. So I always remember Lonergan was a friend of a person who was involved in the revision of canon law, the 1917 version. And he just said, that was a disaster.
Hmm.
So I'm not a legalist, but
You know, anecdotally, to me,
Me-
one of the most iconic moments of Ratzinger's life was on the eve of the beginning of his papacy, when he was celebrated the funeral mass for John Paul II, and the picture, the photo of Ratzinger giving communion to Brother Roger of Taizé.
yeah,
He did?
He did.
yeah, he
And
did.
look, and of course, the Vatican backpedaled on that it was all a mistake and blah, blah, blah. But you look at, there is a sense of rapture and joy on both of their faces at that moment where Ratzinger is placing the host in Brother Roger's hand. And
Yeah.
I think, you know, you can't fake that.
No, you can't.
Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
If I can find it and I'll send it.
oh, please, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, didn't somebody give communion to Tony Blair before he had officially converted to Catholicism?
Yeah, Father Tim Russ was his pastor, and somewhat close to him because they were local. And he tried to exercise a certain influence on him, but he's the one, I think. He's a Lonergan guy too. He's passed away. But when he was at the Greg, this is a funny thing about him. We became friends with a French seminarian whose father owned a vineyard. And he gave Tim a bunch of seeds. So one of the times when we were in England, we went to visit Tim, and he took us out to the vineyard, from which he also got a lot of wine and so forth. And that was a kind of English thing, that you get this eccentricity that's so beautiful in some ways. So that was another form of eccentricity, giving Blair the sacrament.
Mhm.
Oh.
And then there's the other interesting thing that always, how would I say, has impressed me so much liturgically, was it was Ratzinger who, in the CDF, who recognized the validity of the anaphora of Adai and Mari that does not contain words of institution. And, you know, he was certainly giving a nod to the Eastern concept of consecration as being that the whole prayer is consecratory, not just reciting the magic words with proper intention. which I wholeheartedly subscribe to.
I do too. Not that I know anything. but-
I think I do too.
Well, the Eastern tradition has always placed higher value on the prayer of the church embodied in the epiclesis than on the words of institution, which actually, as a literary form, they are part of the anaphora, or a part of the anamnesis. Forgive me for throwing these words around. That they're part of the memory. This is what God has done. This is what Jesus has done. Now we pray, make that present here. Anyway,
I
Makes
like the
sense to
thought.
me.
I'm going to chew on it.
yeah,
Oh, I read something that you guys sent me about Richard Rohr.
But what?
Richard Rohr,
Oh, yeah.
and writer,
Mhm.
mhm,
and the article I read said he had his little, one of his rooms in his house, the little house he lives in, is full of icons. And an awful lot of people in the church these days who take spirituality seriously really have also a devotion to icons. And then what made me think of it is the iconostasis of that is present in the Orthodox churches, by which the people are more or less confronted with the icons first, and hardly ever with the priests as we have them in our church. That when they turned the table around and the priest became the center of the service, it really did lose a lot of its essential symbolism. And you can see that the Orthodox Church is very devoted to the icon. And it's an interesting thing.
I'm all for the icons, but why the icon screen?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that myself, but it's the word holy or sacred really comes from a word for something so great, so highly esteemed that it's set apart. So in a certain sense, they think it emphasizes the holiness of what happens in the Eucharistic service. That's my understanding. So it's something like Karl Adam said that after the Council of Nicaea, when Jesus was said to be divine officially, homoousion, one substance with the Father, that then you started, and I don't know whether this is historically true, but Adam said it. You had Jesus portrayed as a Pantocrator, like in the Hagia Sophia and the dome of the Hagia Sophia. You have this pretty frightening picture of the Pantocrator. And Adam said that's the reason why in the Catholic Church you had the rise of devotions to go-betweens called Mary and the other saints. You couldn't go directly. I remember hearing sermons about go to Mary instead of praying directly to Christ and so forth. So
Don't get me started.
We've had a going debate for, I don't know, 20, 50 years. I don't know.
And that thinks I am what would you call me, Ned? A Mary a disser of Mary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no,
And
no.
like singing,
You're coming along.
daily, daily sing to Mary.
I've recently promoted her to my favorite saint.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is progress.
But that's pushed me as far as I could go. No, I don't know that it's as far as I could go. I will say this, Fred, I once spent about 45 minutes wherein I had decided there was no God. And I remember walking outside and looking up at the stars and saying, well, nothing behind it. But, you know, existence is still kind of cool. And then I said, but wait, if there's no God, then there's no Virgen de Guadalupe. And I know there's a Virgen de Guadalupe. Ergo, there has to be God.
This is George Crook, the lawyer that we know.
Yeah.
Yep, that's him. Oh.
Yeah. No, do I think Our Lady Guadalupe literally existed? I mean, I'm not so sure of that, Ned.
Oh, the Herbie, I think, kind of threw a curve at you about that. Hey, could I, Fred and Tom, what is this mediatrix of all graces? See, George?
Excuse me while I tear my garments.
I mean, John Paul II, as I understand it, wanted to proclaim Mary mediatrix of all graces in some formal way. I don't know whether he wanted to make it an article of faith, but what is this about going to Mary and letting
What
her
do you-
instead of going?
What do you
I
think?
apologize, I forgot to start recording earlier. So repeat everything you said, Fred.
And George, and now Ned.
I'm gonna make the judgment.
He's replaying something.
At some point, not to complicate things more, but
Oh, too complicated.
could you talk a little bit about the levels of consciousness? It seems to me that George, has said, we get stuck maybe in subjectivism, but you're saying you try to plumb the depths of the facts, and then at some point decide, but the levels of consciousness, it seems to me, would either be more refined or not. But again,
So let me say something about consciousness. Consciousness means you're present to yourself. Like when you're going to sneeze,
¿qué pasó? Am I looking at you guys now or last week?
I'm
No,
seeing
no
now
idea.
and hearing now after a strange break there.
I read that. I as reading the book, that is a big thing as far as I'm concerned, and maybe sometime we could talk about that. But let me ask,
oh, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
but just how do we get there? Mediatrix of all graces. What is it? Jesus?
We don't, and we shouldn't.
Yeah, I can't agree more with you. But how did I know that John Paul was completely enamored of Mary, as I am. But what makes that? What makes her the dispenser of grace? And
Nothing.
I mean, I think the way they talk about it is crazy.
Yeah.
But what's crucial is that she's the first person to say, fiat, let it be.
Yeah.
and there wouldn't be the incarnation. There wouldn't be the mediation of Jesus.
Yes.
He didn't say that. And I think that's something to be grateful for, and not to make a myth out of, but because I think if we add too many doodads of devotion, we start missing the point. I'm afraid. And I remember there was an Irish woman who came to our theology department. And I spoke about that we have to conceive of God as an infinite act of loving understanding. And she interrupted me quickly and said, well, that's the way my mother thinks about Mary. So in a way you have Mariolatry
Yeah.
rather than the correct orientation to the Father through the Son and in the Holy Spirit. So I think that's probably enough persons to get involved in our worship.
I completely agree.
But I think it's based on that. And so you have that, and then you also have the Johannine depiction of the cross
Mhm.
with John and Mary at the foot of the cross.
Your mother, yeah.
So she's certainly, but it's John and Mary, it's not just Mary. So I think a devotion to Mary is somehow important, but I was just when we started thinking about the mediatrix, when George raised the question, I was going to ask, how many of you still pray the rosary?
Every day.
Not every day, but occasional.
Yeah,
Every day.
I'm with John,
Yeah, I do.
but I think it's occasional because I'm not good at meditating on the mystery at the same time as saying the prayers.
Takes a special place and time for me to be able to do that.
Yes, I can imagine that.
I don't even try to be aware that I'm saying the prayers. Yeah, I was telling Ned, it's funny. I'm very fond of the rosary, but I don't see it for me as a prayer to the Blessed Virgin much.
I don't either.
Yeah, I in other words,
And that's why the
okay.
mysteries are so important in my life.
Yeah, to me, it's just it's a series of meditations on truths of salvation.
Yeah.
And it's Christological.
That's the way I see it, and what I think that the Hail Marys are sort of a music behind
Right.
the meditation on the particular mysteries, and now it's become a very harmonious thing for me to hear that music in the back. You know, you are blessed, hail, and then pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. And that's just going on in the back, and you know, Jesus is carrying his cross and getting crucified, or Mary is running over to Elizabeth and you know, just enjoying the revelation that both of them have had, and that kind
I'm
of.
not so sure she was enjoying it. My concept of the visitation often is Jesus.
Now what?
No, she wouldn't have said that. What the heck? I'm going to go see Elizabeth. She's married to a priest. She'll be able to explain some of this stuff. You know?
Well, I think Mary really knew it was coming off. Steve, Fred, what do you see? Were you going to say something, Fred, about that?
No,
Oh, I believe.
I just said that way of meditating on it is not implausible, but that's not, it never occurred to me to think that way.
Well, so many saints are into the rosary. Herbie prayed the rosary every day, and he certainly was not a Mariolatrist.
Oh, he would make these crazy statements that, well, if you want something, from you go to the guy, somebody's mother, and and I feel so much more confident asking Jesus that way, which I think was just Herbert bullshit to
He never said stuff like that to me. We always.
He wouldn't say it to me either. He would say it to others in my presence.
Oh.
And then I'd look at him and say, Herbert, your nose is growing.
I look at it as it's nice to have company. I do pray the rosary every day. I didn't used to, but I've become enamored, shall we say, with the devotion. But I see it as kind of like praying with Mary rather than to her, and meditating on her son along with her, and kind of joining in spirit to her in her relationship with her son.
I think that'd be cool.
And there's another little thing that, I never miss a chance, quite frankly, these days, to talk about The Chosen, that video series. And in the second season, I forget which episode, but there's a striking, biblical scholarship be damned. Mary Magdalene is portrayed in a very, very central and realistic way of having been brought from an old life to a new life, whatever the details of that may have been, and becomes very key in the following of Jesus as depicted in The Chosen. Well, there is a time when she suffers a crisis and abandons the crowd of the group of the disciples, and tries to go back to an element of her old life, and comes back.
Oh, wow.
And it is, and all of the other apostles who are with Jesus are frantic, are searching for her. In fact, I think, if I remember rightly, two of them find her and bring her back. And she is so remorseful, she is so ashamed, and everybody is just so delighted to find her there. But the one who runs out of the camp where they are, and apparently at this time Jesus has secluded himself in his tent and is praying. Sorry to be boring you, George.
You're not.
Not at all.
You're not boring me at all.
The one, this is done by an evangelical, the creator of all of this, an evangelical Protestant. But the one who comes out to meet them and is the first one to embrace Mary Magdalene is Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus. And there's two very touching little
Scenes?
the parts of that scene, one of which is Mary takes her veil, because Mary Magdalene was bareheaded and disheveled, takes her veil and places it over her head. And then the second one is that then she takes her by the hand and leads her into Jesus in the tent when Mary Magdalene is still kind of resisting. I can't forgive myself. I can't be forgiven for backsliding, as it were. And it's Mary in the vision of this Protestant author. Mary is the one who actually, with the other apostles around, is the one who leads her into the tent, and then Jesus, of course, embraces her. And I thought, that's a neat thing for a Protestant filmmaker to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even agree with that.
Big time. That's
So
wonderful.
that would make her the mediatrix of grace.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Well, of some sort too. Now, if we can just get off of that damn dualistic attitude, either it is or it isn't, and see that reality isn't that way. Reality is much more flowing, if you will, and that there are elements of one thing and another sort of intermingling, and sometimes gracefully intermingling. Sometimes the elements of two polarities don't mingle very gracefully, and one corrupts the other.
And sometimes they just stand side by side.
Sometimes they stand side by side silently, without the need to go through all kinds of intellectual contortions to reconcile them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm afraid of with that show, Tom? I tried to watch it once and I couldn't crack how to get into it. The Chosen, but I'm afraid that if I watched it, then the way that guy looks as playing Jesus would be my image of Jesus the rest of my life,
I have to
It
say,
would just take over my subconscious somehow.
well, I have to say that that's true for me, but it was true actually before he started playing in The Chosen, because he's a friend of mine. And he was Lecter, and I was at some point sort of a spiritual director for him while he was when I was in Beverly Hills. So, and I used to say, Jonathan, you are the quintessential Jesus. I would love to see you play the part of Jesus. And lo and behold, that happened.
Okay, you've got me hooked now.
Anyway, give it a try. Give it a try.
Yes.
Well, but what about my fear? I don't have a very strong visual image of Jesus. I picture a beard and brown hair and a white robe. But that's as far as I go,
What about your beard? What about your fear? Jesus said, fear not.
Well, yeah, that he did. But somebody said, esto prudens, Domine.
Is that Aramaic? I don't know. Give it a try. TheChosen.tv, or best viewed on an app, whether from Google Play or the Apple store. Just look up The Chosen and it'll come fairly easily, I think.
Well, it sounds terrific, everything I've read about it.
Oh, the scene that you just described is just absolutely wonderful.
There were a lot of wonderful scenes, including the facial expressions on Jesus' face when it was absolutely marvelous when, Peter is saying, Lord, we fished all night. And here's Peter or Simon in total desperation because he's about to lose everything to the tax collector, Matthew, which is another interesting little dynamic here.
Well, yeah, that certainly is.
When he finishes all night, he said, Master, and Jesus, do you really want me to do this? And Jesus just sort of smiles and shrugs his shoulders. And then Anyway, it's interesting.
Fred, have you seen it?
No, I don't watch any TV except for news sometimes.
Yeah.
I
Well,
just-
this isn't on any regular TV channel or network. It's available online and mainly available through the app. And that's one of the things that makes it accessible in many countries where everything is not accessible except having a cell phone.
Right.
So
Okay.
one gets an app, you go to the Apple App Store?
If you have an iPhone or iPad, yeah,
Okay,
go to the App Store and just search for The Chosen and it'll come up, and then just click on it. And it is totally free. They
okay.
solicit donations. They're not too obnoxious about it, really, but they're getting there. I think the next season is about 2/3 funded, maybe 3/4 funded now.
Well, that Mary Magdalene episode you described sounds promising, interesting.
More than any other Jesus flick, it treats the scriptures, how would I say, sincerely and authentically. In other words, it does not violate anything in the scriptures. It may violate some people's interpretations, but it's based on the scripture, but it launches from that into, okay, exploring what might the background, what might the backstory or the many backstories of those 12 names,
Sure.
most of whom have no speaking part, whatever. What might be the backstory of them? There's a marvelous thing in the second season also about Nathaniel or Bartholomew, whom we celebrated the other.
Celebrated, yeah.
And that business about being under the fig tree. It's a very interesting backstory there that I'm not going to reveal to you.
You've got to have a backstory there because, my goodness, I saw you with a fig tree. Oh, you are God. You are the Son of God. You know what?
Yeah, but was he ashamed and embarrassed?
He
when
was
Jesus said that?
embarrassed. His whole world had fallen apart, and he is beseeching heaven.
Under the fig tree.
God, save me. God, do something. Where are you? Where are you, God? And then Philip comes up and says, hey, Nathaniel, we found the Messiah. He's from Nazareth. Yeah, can any good come out of Nazareth? It's fabulous.
That's because I've wondered from time to time, what was he doing under the fig tree? And it could have been something nefarious, or it could have been he was having a profound experience of God and was just astounded when Jesus knew that.
Or maybe-
but I like that one.
Having a profound experience of the absence of God.
Yes, I like that better. I hadn't thought of that possibility.
There's something, I think, there is something inspired in those
Equally.
in that series, and I sure hope that they get enough donations to.
Barnes.
Yeah, see, here's my real hope, and I'll be quiet. I hope they get enough donations to be able to film through the completion, which is 8 seasons,
Oh, Lord. And
quickly before Jonathan Rumi gets too old to play Jesus. Because he's already well into his 40s, I think possibly pushing 50. I do know he has to dye his beard, and he probably dyes his hair too. but
Decided that there will be 8 seasons?
that's the projected, you know, Dallas Jenkins, the creator of it, has something of a timeline in his mind that would comprise 8 seasons.
Yeah, I've read, there was a favorable review of it in the New York Times 6 months ago or so.
Mhm.
Has anybody seen the movie Risen? Risen.
Very good.
Besides Ned and I.
Very, very good.
That's the one with what's his name? Played
What's
Shakespeare in Love.
one of the Fiennes boys?
Yeah, Joseph.
Finney's.
Yeah, I've actually persuaded the St. Charles RCIA team to show that every year. Do you know what it's about, Fred?
Oh,
It's just an interesting movie. The central conceit of it is that there's this very world weary Roman tribune who's just tired. He's tired of killing people. He's tired of, he knows there's something more, doesn't know what it is, but boy, is he a soldier. And so the first scene is he is helping put down a rebellion somewhere, and he picks up a spear to kill this it's a Jewish zealot, and that the throw is, remember that, Dad, one of the great athletic achievements, the way he does this spear, and you get the idea. This guy's a formidable soldier and leader of men. So then he comes back from the skirmish to Jerusalem and comes to see Pilate, or is summoned to see Pilate. And Pilate says, look, I got an assignment for you, dude. There's this crazy guy out there claiming to be a prophet. And he's actually saying he's going to rise again in 3 days. Imagine. And like right now, he's being crucified outside the walls. And I want you to go out and make sure that he's buried securely, so nobody could come and say he rose from the dead, as he claims he's going to do. You know, the crazy Jews, they're saying, well, his disciples will steal his body and put a guard out there, and these crazy wackos are. And so just make sure that there's no possibility of that kind of bullshit hysteria. Well, guess what? And so then the guards, in case, get drunk, and then nobody knows what happened the following morning. Jesus isn't in the tomb. And so the rumors start that he's risen from the dead, and the Pharisees are pissed, and Pilate says to the tribune, he says, I'm going to have these crazy fuckers in here any minute now. And I want to be ready with my, and you hear this voice say, too late. And it's the Jewish delegation walking into the proscenium. So he tells the tribune, he's not amused, Pilate. You go out to Jerusalem and you dig up everybody that's died since Friday, and we're going to put an end to this rumor. So he goes out and he's digging everybody up, and you see that, it's not pretty always. The common graves and all that, and they don't find Jesus, and well, eventually he does. And I don't know. I think of it as a very powerful scene when he finds Jesus.
Mhm.
What do you think, Ned?
Absolutely.
I'm sold now.
I've got to go watch that again. I watched it when it first came out. In fact, Joseph Fiennes was a was also a parishioner for a time at Good Shepherd.
Oh, is he a Catholic? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a Catholic. His mother, can't think of her name now, but she died of breast cancer. And while she was dying, she made a pilgrimage through Europe all by herself and wrote about it on pilgrimage. Lash is his name. There's also an English theologian, her brother, I believe.
Pastor Moore,
Benedict Lash or
Nicholas Lash.
Nicholas Lash, yeah. Okay. He is an uncle to the Fiennes brothers.
Well, and the brother played the Amon Guth, the Nazi commandant in Schindler's List.
Rafe Fiennes?
Great finds, yeah.
Yeah, you know, when you go to Krakow, it's the wildest thing. Schindler's factory is still there. I'll send you guys a picture of it. You'll recognize it from the movie. And it's the actual building that you see, you know, 20 times in the movie as people are going in and out. And it's now a museum about the Holocaust in Krakow. But as you walk up to it and you go, no, this can't be, you know, but that's what it is. But the first half of the movie, I think, of the Risen movie is much better than the second. Anyway, it is what it is.
Amen.
Well, I have to tell you that when I joined this group earlier in the summer, it never occurred to me that when I start teaching this Monday, I have classes from 1 to 3, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so I'm going to have to depart the group because I do have to teach that class. And so I just wanted to say how grateful I am to all of you for having me as part of that.
Why don't you bring your phone into the classroom and we can edify your students?
You're supposing that I have such a phone.
Well, whatever you're on.
Not to put you on the spot, Fred, but we could change the date to Thursdays. You know, if you would like to do that.
I vote yes.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, but Fred's also going to be busy.
Yeah, teaching is not exactly, easy.
Oh, if you let me check. I do have one class on Thursday, and I'm not sure what time it is. Senior.
Well, there are other days we could change it to.
Could I suggest, why don't I keep you on the list, the mailing, the email list,
Great.
and so you can be informed of whatever the hell is going through our minds, and such as it is, and
Such as they are.
Yeah. And anytime you might be able to join us, or anytime that you might want to, make a comment on anything, and perhaps later, especially when Farrick is with us, we could talk a little bit more about changing the time. I'm not too sure that another time would work with me immediately, but I may be able to, myself rearrange a few things. But in the immediate future, I think Thursday may not be good for me. But
well, what about a Tuesday? Let's see how it gels.
Let's see how it gels.
What are you teaching, Fred? What are the courses?
I teach us, a lot of us became distressed by our core courses, which are distributed, it's course distribution among different segments of the School of Arts and Sciences. And so the students are supposed to take these different courses and integrate them into a liberal education, which obviously is never happening. So we decided to work out a substitution for the core called the Perspectives Program, which has 4 years. The first year was from Plato and the Bible to Nietzsche. The second year is about the arts. The third year is about the horizon of the new social sciences. And then the fourth year is math and science. So in that way, the students don't have to integrate everything for themselves. In a way, the course is helping them do that. So I teach in Perspectives 3. I was one of the founders of this. And so it's Horizons in the New Social Sciences. That's the one. Then the second course I teach on Wednesday is God, Self, and Society. And that's my theology core course, where I have 40 students. Last semester, 29 of my 40 students were taking the course from China.
Wow.
So it had to be recorded the way we do. And the Chinese, instead of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, could watch it anytime. But so those are my 2 basic courses. And this year, because I'm teaching also the seniors in Perspectives, have a perspective seminar, senior seminar. And I'm one of the hosts to that. And so that's my Thursday take. This year, this only happens in the first semester. In the second semester, I'll have my political theology course for grad students called Theology as Political. And that will take place probably Tuesday or Monday afternoon, later in the day. So that's the picture for me.
Wow.
Wow.
The politics theology course, what do you cover?
A multitude. Basically, we cover great works in theology and politics, but also of secular politicians who have a sympathy towards religion, at least. So we read people like Leo Strauss, a Jewish political philosopher, Eric Voegelin, Habermas, and we read parts of The City of God by Augustine, and so forth. So it's those kinds of readings. When I can send you one of my syllabuses from the course in the past, and you can get a taste.
Yeah, please do.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for accommodating me insofar as
Oh, it's been wonderful.
This is-
Yeah, I have been, I think I speak for all of us, but I say having you among us enriches us, truly so.
well, it's certainly true for me, from my side, that you guys do that for me completely.
I can't imagine how.
Well, that's the problem with your imagination.
Gotcha, George.
I guess so. How do I respond to that? It's the put down that's a compliment all at once.
And now that I've read the half the book, we're not going to get a chance to discuss and compare and contrast and all that kind of stuff. What it's a difficult for me. This quest for God and the good life has been rewarding, but it's also been difficult to get back into those kinds of categories of thinking.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
and just the incremental building on previous concepts. I love the self-transcendence concept, and I'd really like to understand how he really resolves the values part, the moral ethics part of it, because it seems like it almost precariously leans over on subjectivity, but no, there's authenticity, and here are the ways that one can strive for authenticity, and it's that to me would be just wonderful to review and talk about sometime.
It gets you, it should get you out of the idea, which we were brought up in our philosophy courses, of the subjects in here and the reality is out there. And that
Yeah.
your main way of getting to reality is by sensation alone.
Mhm.
Rather, what we mean by consciousness is presence to ourselves, but also as presence to the world. So it goes in stages. If you're in a deep and dreamless sleep, your consciousness is at a low ebb. But if someone dropped this ash on your arm, you'd feel it. And then there are the dreams who are present to our dreams. And there are different kinds of dreams, somatic, dreams of early morning, and so forth and so on. But then when you wake up, now you're present through your senses. And what you're present to through your senses, you can wonder about. And I have the experience that you guys are used to wondering about things.
Yeah.
And so there's a built way of wondering, but the key to the different levels of consciousness and the different ways of being present to the world are signaled by the types of questions you're asking. Questions for understanding, questions for judgment, questions for deliberation and evaluation, and questions then having to do with making a good decision. And this is it's a cycle. We go through these things all the time. So for example, Tom brought up the problem of coordinating our meetings henceforth. So we're wondering how to do it, if we can, and maybe we can't. But still, what Tom said at the end seems like the only way to go right off the bat. I'm grateful for that. But so we always wonder about courses of action. We're engulfed in all the critiques of Biden for not having deliberated well about how to do this exodus. Nevertheless, we understand that he was in a tough spot because of the agreement that Trump made with the Taliban alone and not with the regular government and so forth and so on. So it's a complicated issue. I'm sort of startled by how easy people jump to the conclusions that they do, as if it was a simple matter. But so deliberation is central. But before you deliberate, it's good if you one of my things I always have in my mind is something that Charlie Barr said, which is confidence is that feeling you have before you really understand the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
situation before you understand the situation. So I thought that rang so true. And we
It
have-
also, I think, enhances what we do together so that we don't jump
Mhm.
alone. We don't move to opinions alone,
that's
and we
right.
have a chance to share and to listen.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point that Mark brought out, that our lives are matters of mutual mediation with our friends.
Hmm.
And that's, I really have felt that since I joined this group. You guys are on my mind, but also helping me think about matters in a way that before I hadn't done. So I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, well, that's flattering.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
One thing that dawned on me too, because I, am recording these sessions, you'll be included in the list to get the link for the recordings, even though they're not available publicly from, searching, and they're not on my my YouTube channel page, so they are privately distributed among us. But you'll have the recordings should you ever want to,
yeah.
replay them and see what we're doing. One of the nice things about YouTube, as I keep pointing out, is you can always speed them up without sounding like chipmunks. And very little, if anything, nothing is ever lost at 1 1/4 speed, and can often get up to 1 1/2 or 1 3/4 speed without losing very much. So you can go through it relatively fast and at least see what's being talked about.
You control the speed.
On the YouTube screen, there's a little gear icon,
Uh-huh.
or on some other YouTube screens, I think on the iOS or on the, what do you call it, on the iPhone or an iPad, there's 3 lines for a little menu bar. You just click that, and one of the things is speed control.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm being called to lunch.
Okay,
Well,
one
thank-
last thing I do want to share. Wednesday was my very last radiation treatment. So I'm all finished
Oh,
with that. And hopefully the zapping got it. I'll find out probably what the progress is in a couple of weeks when I see my regular oncologist. But I do want to share with you this is the team, my radiation technicians, and there is the True Beam beast behind them that I watched for 90 seconds every day, going around my body twice and aimed at particular strategic areas. So they were happy it was finished. I was happy it was finished. And one little point, as I was walking out of there, the woman there, her name is Nancy, went to the control console where they can play background music, and she played a Pomp and Circumstance march.
Your graduation.
My
I
graduation.
love it.
that is funny.
That's really great, Tom.
Great, thank you.
So glad you're
Well,
done.
thank you, guys. Well, I guess it's over and out time.
Keep praying for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For you
Thank you.
God bless. All right.
You all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everybody, Tom, John.